Hey, it's Drybear. Dune Awakening has been having a week of all weeks. They've had a whole bunch of issues with just abusing, duping, making changes, and they're still trying to kind of recapture where their audience is, because a lot of people love the game. I think at its core, for the first 5 tiers, Dune Awakening is excellent. It's a great survival game. Most of the gripes that people have come with tier 6, the final tier in the game, which represents their endgame loop with the Landsraad and the Deep Desert, as well as the PvP versus PvE crowds going head to head. And so even though they said they wouldn't, they've been on this process of kind of backpedaling a little bit, making changes, trying to make their audience happy, which in some cases has been a positive effect and in some cases has been a negative. But they just put out a patch with another round of kind of caving in for what the players are asking for. So today, let's go through what those changes are and maybe some thoughts on where the game is now and what they are heading towards, at least in the future, if they're trying to keep the same size audience that they have now continuing forward. The first change they just made was that tier 6 resources can now be collected across wider areas in the PvE part of the Deep Desert. So if you haven't been following the endgame progress for Dune Awakening, they made a very small single row area in the Deep Desert that is safe, and everything else, the other 90% of the Deep Desert, is PvP. However, a lot of players didn't like the fact that it was just free for all PvP, anyone could do whatever they wanted, and there are people that wanted to play a PvE version of the game, being able to move into tier 6 without risking all of their gear and loot for other players that might be grouping up and trying to zerg them down. So they recently, about a week ago, they had made a change where, maybe 50% of the Deep Desert is PvE with some PvP flag zones in it, and then the rest of it is PvP. However, there's been a bunch of major issues with that, people being able to, now that part of it is PvE, people building bases on top of very important nodes and blocking them off so no one else can use that node and harvest it. A lot of people are just griefing with each other with how they build. And also in the PvE zone, since you can't kill other players, people have been body blocking each other, getting on top of each other with vehicles, trying to cut their vehicle movement off or block people inside of areas, or even go with their buggy in front of another person's base and then take the wheels off so they can't move, and then that person can't leave their base. So there's been a whole lot of issues with that overall. And so being able to spread out the resources in the PvE portions of the Deep Desert is hopefully going to help a lot with that. I haven't experienced too much resource hogging, at least on my server, my world that I'm on right now, but I'm sure a lot of people have. I've seen a lot of complaints around this kind of griefing idea. So spreading the resources out, I think, is a positive. Next, they added an element of randomization to the respawn timer of unique loot containers in the Deep Desert. This was becoming a big problem because all of the timers on the loot, especially the boxes that are inside certain POIs, are on a fixed exact timer, which means that people can monopolize them by going into the area, looting the unique loot container, grabbing the loot, setting a timer on Google or their Apple smartwatch or something, and then coming back the exact second it respawns, and then take the loot for themselves and fly away like their job is done, right? So like a lot of things are being kind of monopolized there. So by spreading out the resources and then also adding a random timer to the unique loot containers means that it should be a little bit more fair for people that are trying to gather the loot. Next, the Plastanium tier, so tier 6, crafting components were split up to drop based on the content locations. Now they're actually trying to make it so certain items drop from certain locations, at least on the patch. After the patch, I checked on the Deep Desert just now. I didn't have any of these shown on the minimap icons, but they said that the Imperial testing stations, the caves, and the shipwrecks each will have their own drops for what items come from them, with each of them dropping their own selection of components. And then they also said that fallen shipwrecks, so when the ships that crash from the sky, or buried treasure that you get with your scanner, are still can be dropped from everywhere. And I think that's the best way to do it. Those are random. Honestly, the shipwrecks don't happen enough. They're pretty uncommon. I feel like they could drop a lot more, or there could be different types of shipwrecks that come down, small, medium, large ships that have different loot and stuff like that. That might create a lot of collision issues on the server, depending on how big the ship is. But I think that the game desperately needs a lot more dynamic events that happen, because one, they don't happen very often, and they also aren't very rewarding when when they do happen. So having that change is pretty good. But this will probably take maybe a week or two of people like going and trying out the new drop areas, the testing stations, caves, and the shipwrecks. So let me know what you think about this, especially if it's been a couple days since this patch has been live, on how you feel the separation of resources makes sense in tier 6. They also added a chance of a different selection of uniques drop in PvE loot in Deep Desert. Now, from what I've seen, at least in the first couple weeks of doing Dune Awakening, the drops for the unique schematics were all fixed for the week. And so, you know, if you wanted to get the Dune Watcher, you'd have to be during the Dune Watcher week in order to get it from the Deep Desert, which I guess kind of feeds into the reset idea of having new stuff every week with reset. But it sounds like they're adding a chance of a different selection of uniques drop in PvE loot in Deep Desert. This is kind of like a broad term. I'm not sure actually what they mean by this line item in the patch notes, but it seems like, at least from the PvE areas, like the chests that drop and all of that, it sounds like they extended the loot tables for those specific PvE items. So you can actually just go in and get different uniques, which I think is good, because the weekly rotation on the schematics was like 3 or 4 schematics, and you kept getting the same ones over and over and over. And so the idea was to stockpile every week or sell on the marketplace if that's what you're after. But having more loot dropping in PvE, I think, is good. Next, they increased the spawn rate of the medium fields and the small fields for spice in the Deep Desert. And I can actually confirm that these seem to be happening more than they were before quite a good bit. So actually getting like some good value out of these. So I was just driving around the Deep Desert. It did seem like there were slightly more plumes, and there were also, most importantly, more medium-sized plumes as well, which you don't really get too much of. Like in the first couple of weeks, it was usually you were either doing the big, like granddaddy ringmouth worm plumes, assuming you could even get there without being killed in PvP, or you were doing a small spice plume every now and then. But increasing the frequency of those fields popping up for medium and for the small, I think, is a good boon. There's also a lot of people that got a whole bunch of spice melange from duping and things like that that don't need to do it, or just the big orgs that have the trawler plus the carrier being able to get a lot of spice melange very quickly. But having more medium and more small is good, and I can say, at least from my anecdotal experience, that it has been an improvement and is quite noticeable. Next is an interesting change. So they changed the delay for leaving a PvP flagged area from a 5-second timer till you're unflagged to a 30-second timer till you're unflagged. This was my first comment when they said they were going to extend the PvE zone out into the Deep Desert, is that anytime you have a PvE safe zone next to a PvP flagged zone, there's always going to be those people that kind of straddle the line, right? They sit on the fence and they pop over and try to attack you and then pop back to the safe zone. New World has this problem. A lot of games have this problem. And so kind of messing with when you get flagged, how long you stay flagged, and what people can do to you based on where you're standing is quite important. And so this is what I would say is like a first level change. So it doesn't change the timer for you becoming flagged, right? So you becoming flagged is still 5 seconds. So when you enter into a PvP zone, it'll give you that timer at the top and it'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom, you're flagged. Other people who are flagged can shoot you and kill you. And then, you know, that is available as part of the flagging system. So it used to be that this 5-second timer was applied to entering and exiting PvP zones, but, you know, as hopefully anyone could have predicted, when you add those zones next to PvP areas, people are going to step out and haha, neener, you can't get me, then step back in, and they're doing like some kind of old school line dance where they're popping in and out. By adding this timer for this means that once you become flagged, it will take 30 seconds for you to become unflagged. And I actually tested this. You can get pretty freaking far away from the PvP zone and you're still damageable. So here, like, I got flagged in a PvP zone in the Deep Desert and I just flew away to see how far I could get. But again, you are flagged the entire 30 seconds. So you can get pretty far away from the flagged zone. I'm still flagged this entire time, then I'm still flagged and I'm still flagged. So I can get to several POIs over because I'm in an ornithopter where I can still be shot at by other people who are flagged. Now, this isn't really a major deal at this. I think 30 seconds is probably a good middle ground save point. I think longer and it gets kind of weird where, like, if I get flagged and I leave the zone or I go somewhere else entirely and I'm still flagged, that timer gets kind of awkward. I think they could certainly implement more elegant systems other than just a pure timer, but it is, I think, an improvement for people jumping into PvP and then trying to run away and then being invulnerable after they get away. So, like, especially in an area where you're trying to loot things and you want to be able to steal that loot from people, I think it's kind of weird to flag and then unflag unflag almost instantly. So that timer for becoming unflagged, I think, is in a good spot right now. And if it becomes a problem, you know, stays a problem in the future, they should probably look at other solutions that are a little more elegant than just a rote timer before you unflag. But I think that most PvPers would probably agree a longer unflag time is probably for the best in the state the game is in now. Then they changed the Landsraad task to allow for kill and delivery contribution to happen after the task has been completed, but awarding only personal contributions. This is a big ask that people have been asking for in the community for, you know, honestly since the beta, but the idea that the Landsraad starts and then guilds can monopolize the end. As soon as the task pops up, they can close it immediately. Once it's closed, you can't make any personal contribution. And so it really is just which guilds have the most resources and are able to be online when the task comes online. Now, they kind of did a middle ground compromise here where you can still contribute to the Landsraad task and get personal contribution points, but it won't count towards the Landsraad, meaning that once the Landsraad task is closed, a guild has gotten contribution for it, it will no longer apply to the total race of who's winning the Landsraad anymore. It will only be personal contribution. So it's kind of like a middle ground between what it was before and what people wanted it to be. And I think this is probably fair. It means that, you know, it's not just about who's online and win. You can at least contribute to it and get, you know, some partial rewards and personal contribution for being part of the Landsraad, but it's not going to influence the outcome of the Landsraad if you continue to contribute to that task after it's closed. I still think they need some kind of improvement to the system as it stands right now. Just having these tasks pop up randomly throughout the day, and it's really just whoever gets there first can close it out. And it's more, you know, I don't think any competition is best suited for online games if it's whoever happens to be online when it happens. I think there's so many better ways to do that, especially considering if you have a worldwide game across many time zones, across many cultures and languages, you know, some cultures have to eat dinner with their families, and some cultures can stay up late, and some cultures can, you know, take breaks off of work to log in to do something. Some cultures can't, right? So like all of that is very dependent on where you are, how you live, and what time zone you're in, and all of that. And I think that there can be much better improvements to Landsraad as it stands right now, but at least this is kind of like a small throw you a bone kind of situation where, yes, now people can do personal contribution to the Landsraad, even though that task has already been closed up by somebody else. Then, as I mentioned, they've been having a ton of issues with dupers, hackers, cheaters, instability, servers going down, people losing vehicles, people crossing server meshing thresholds and being dropped out of their ornithopter and placed into quicksand and dying instantly. So tons of problems. And so along with this patch, they improved game stability, they reduced the cases where the sandworm can push vehicles under terrain. There's still situations where the sandworm can destroy stuff in safe zones or can shove things, even though technically the sandworm isn't really in outside of like their worm sign areas. But this is going to be a step in the right direction. And they added a new audio alert for the PvP zone change. So when you change from PvE to PvP, and I think also PvP to PvE, there's a new audio cue that lets you know that that's happening. And along with this patch, they also did a whole bunch of fixes. They fixed an issue with the contract, do you have what it takes? There's still a bunch of contracts, by the way, that are kind of in an odd spot, but this is a good improvement. So do you have what it takes? And it says here they're looking for recruits to complete the contract. They did fix that one as well. They fixed an issue where contract rewards dropped on the ground if your inventory was full, which could lead to situations where you could miss them. I think they just need to do better about like being able to collect loot. I also really hope that someday they make it so that when you try to break open doors with a cut array that require a cut array, that you're able to drop the salvaged metal on the ground instead of like being unable to open the door because there's no room in your inventory for the salvaged metal that nobody wants once they've made it past their first hour in the game. Like having to have inventory space for salvaged metal to cut things is kind of wild, so hopefully they fix that. Fixed an issue where vehicle modules wouldn't highlight properly after the player had applied a customization variant. Fixed an issue where the positioning of a pentashield surface could overlap with an existing pentashield surface. This actually might be kind of a downside because some people made some pretty cool layouts by overlapping pentashields, and that sounds like that might be no longer viable. And then fixed an exploit that would allow building a vehicle with items from another player's inventory. So hopefully more of these to come, but let me know what you think about these changes for the patch down below, the deep desert changes, the current state of deep desert PvE versus PvP, and also just what you think about the end game and the future of Dune Awakening. If you think like they're doing enough, or they're not doing enough, or if there's changes you'd like to see, let me know what those are. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.